There are people online. So we're trying to play by the rules. Yeah. Because I definitely don't need it. There you go. There you are.
You got it? Okay.
No, why don't you grab that one that Jason has.
We're getting all this new equipment in the auditorium. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sue Shipe-Giles. I'm one of the adult services librarians here at Bexley Public Library. This program tonight is part of our In-Demand Jobs Week 2023, Small Business Startups Meeting Entrepreneurship Challenges. Our speaker is Kevin Rouch. He is an attorney in Ohio. He's been practicing for more than 37 years. He's also president of the Bexley Area Chamber of Commerce. He's represented many small businesses in all types of aspects, and he's run businesses himself. He's also the former theater director of Bexley's Drexel Theatre. Before I pass this on, the talk on to Kevin, I did want to let you know that I did get various brochures from the Secretary of State about how to start all types of businesses, the Tech Cred program, and just generally how to start a small business. They're all in the back there. You can take whatever you would like. And also, I do have some handouts dealing with another In-Demand Jobs Week program that we are having. We had it Monday and also tomorrow. It's one-on-one resume help from 1 to 3 p.m. You can sign up for an appointment or just stop by between 1 and 3, and Rachel from our Human Resources Department will help you with your resume. A couple of programs that are upcoming. This Friday, May 5th from 6 to 8, the Bexley Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Event is taking place in our parking lot. Also, the Friends of the Library are having their book sale on Thursday, May 11th through Sunday, May 14th. We're having our next tea at 3 on Sunday, May 21st from 3 to 4 p.m. It's going to feature Pandemonium 4. And finally, our next Fun Friday, and we are hoping against all hope that it doesn't rain this time, will be on May 26th from 5 to 7. We're going to have food trucks again, and we're also having the musical entertainment Red Healer. So now, without further ado, I am going to have Kevin discuss small business startups. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Hi, everybody. As you heard, I was the theater director at the Drexel, so I probably served you all popcorn at one time or another. I was there through 2018, so about 5 years ago now I left. But I was there during the renovation. That was the main reason I was there, was to kind of shepherd that renovation. And I got to work also with Jeff Frank, who I learned a lot about the movie business from, and got to do some of the things that after he left, got to do some of the things that he did in terms of programming, and had a lot of fun there. So that's how I got to the chamber, is having worked at the theater. So even though I live in Grandview, I get to spend a lot of time in Bexley, so I feel really lucky about that. I have 4 kids, all grown. My little one went to Capitol, so I'm really connected now with the Bexley area, and I'm happy for it. Now, what I want to talk to you about tonight, and I apologize in advance. It's a little more informal, so please feel free to ask questions as we go, because once people hear a lawyer and rules about starting a business, usually their eyes kind of roll back a little bit and worry about, this tax regulation and this form and so on. And we will talk about some tax things and some forms. But more important, we're just going to talk about those kind of common sense things that come up as you look at starting a business. And as Sue said, I've actually started some good, some bad on my own behalf. Fortunately, my clients have a better batting percentage than I do. So we'll talk about that and how kind of the decisions you make as you go affect how successful you can be. And sometimes it's just beyond your really ability to change the circumstances. And we saw a lot during the pandemic being the most recent thing. Of course, I represented people during the recession of 2009, and we saw a lot of other businesses kind of get weeded out depending on what they do. What I think is kind of interesting about business during these crises is that some owners of businesses use this to pare down. They kind of use it as an excuse to pare down employees, pare down costs, some good, some bad intentioned, but we've seen it. And right now, I think we're in that kind of rebuilding we've seen. You remember there were staffing issues during the pandemic, for example. We'll talk about employees here in a minute, that there were staffing issues, and those seem just kind of as people want to get back out there, want to get back into the workplace, we're starting to see those work out a little bit. So let's kind of deal with this as starting a business, and actually I just started another one a couple of months ago. I'm a serial entrepreneur in that sense. The This Week papers went away, if you all know that now, right? Bexley News went away. And in Grandview, we had the Tri-Village News with Arlington and, kind of part of Columbus in there as well. And Marble Cliff is the other kind of village that's beside us. And it went away. And I've been involved in the sports world a long time. My dad was a sports announcer, really famous in Zanesville, my hometown. You're fine. He was famous in Muskingum County, and that was about it, because he was on the 6, 11 o'clock news, so we always knew where he was. And so I was involved in that. I was not as good a player as he was. He was a college football player. But I have my 3 sons, all played college football, Division III. Oliver played at Capital. That was part of his education there. So when the This Week papers went away, I was kind of sad about that, because we like to look up and see how the kids are doing on their teams and in the schools, in the news, and the city council. So when I found that out, I had just ruptured my Achilles, and I was, bed rest for 6 weeks. And I thought, well, I know how to do websites, so I'm going to start a sports website and I went out and hired 3 of the reporters from This Week and a photographer. And so for the past 2 months, that's been my hobby, is to go and try to cover again. And I'll talk about that business. You don't have to know anything about sports, because it really is more about starting an online business. How do you do that? All right, so let's kind of work through. And again, ask any questions as you go. You'll see that there are some, things have changed since I started doing this nearly 40 years ago. All right, the first thing when you put together a business idea is to think about developing your team. And sometimes you may be able to do something in lieu of finding somebody, but these are the people that you want to find, and they are in order of importance. And yes, I put lawyer last, because we are really a temporary job in this environment. The first person to find, whether it's an accountant or a bookkeeper, is someone to help you keep track of your finances. It is the single hardest thing to do unless you're a financial person. I represent a woman who started a new accounting agency. She did not have to go find an accountant. But most people do. And it may be that you only use them quarterly. It may be that all they do is file your taxes. But you need to have them available to answer questions as you go. So that's the first person. And again, we're going to talk today about when you start your business, you're going to worry about how you pay taxes, what forms you've got to file and when, because penalties are awful. You don't want to do that. So that's what they'll be able to do that. And also recording requirements. What do I need to keep track of to give to my accountant? Or if I'm doing my own taxes, to do that. The second person, and almost equally as important, is your insurance agent. Now, we're going to talk in a minute that when you start a business, you do not want to be able to be sued personally. You do not want to be able to be sued in a way that you've got to give up your personal assets. Your car, your house. A couple of my kids would have been on the block probably at certain times. So you don't want to do that. So this insurance agent helps you in keeping your business shielded. That's why I used that really bad icon there, is because they're shielding you from liability. And there are amazing kinds of coverage out there that you might not even think of. For example, in starting this sports website, because we're writing about people, I had to go out and get defamation insurance. There is such a thing. So if one of my writers, who I can't pay attention to everything they write, says something that's wrong or defamatory, we've got coverage for that. Or in the case of a website, if we violate somebody's privacy, we have insurance that will cover that as well. And I wouldn't have known that, except I have a really good insurance agent who told me that. A tech consultant. Now, obviously, 40 years ago, we didn't worry about that part of it. But today we have to. You need to have somebody that you can call. And again, not somebody that's in the business, but somebody that you can call, your person, who you can ask a question. My computer's not booting up, right? Or how do I do this in Word? Or if you're looking for a spreadsheet, how can I do this so I don't have to add up the columns? And if you have a person, and there are plenty around Columbus, that don't have a taxi meter by the phone, that you can call and ask a question. Now, if it's something more detailed, you're going to pay for that. But that's why you should try to locate somebody where you can ask those questions. Otherwise, you'll spend hours trying to figure it out, and I've done that too. The last one is the lawyer. Now, the lawyer is going to be important, and I'm required by law to say this. The lawyer is going to be important at the very beginning. And what you want the lawyer for is what we just talked about a little bit, and that is this idea of limited liability. You do not want to put your future in the way because you didn't clean off the sidewalk in front of the business, right? Or if you said something defamatory, or whatever you can get in trouble for in that particular business, you want to set yourself up in the right way to do that. So again, this is the 4 types of people that I would look for to be able to get them on the phone right away. The first thing that you're going to have to do is choose an entity. Now, I'm going to give you the most popular 4. There are more than this. Lots more than this. The way that a lot of people do things is by sole proprietorship. That's just a person starting out doing it by themselves. You don't have to file anything to do that. You can just start doing it. The problem with the sole proprietorship is general liability. That is, again, if you do something wrong, you can get sued personally. And that, your business just goes away. General partnership, 2 or more people who, again, you want to have a partnership agreement if you do this. You technically don't have to. No one's going to make you do it. And if the only thing that you have to file with a general partnership is if they're going to do business in some ways. Like if you're going to own real estate as a partnership, you have to register with the state of Ohio. You have to tell them who the people are in your partnership in order for that to work. But again, general liability. When 2 people just go out and start doing stuff, they get a truck and they go out and start fixing roofs, and they don't do anything more than that, they are considered to be a general partnership. Just like if you do it by yourself, you're considered to be a sole proprietor. Now, let's get to the ones that I want you to be. And we were lucky when I first started practicing, these came into existence. They had been in some other states, limited liability company, LLCs, and it was a gift to those of us starting businesses because it is the most flexible of all of the entities, right? And you've seen a lot of companies that you deal with that have those initials after their name, LLC. What an LLC is made up of, if you think, we all know corporations because we've all lived with those our whole lives, and we hear shareholders, and those are the people that own a corporation. Talk about that in a sec. Limited liability company has members. And instead of shares of stock, they have a percentage of ownership that adds up to, obviously, 100. And they have limited liability. In other words, they can only be sued for the amount of assets that are in the company. in the LLC. The individual members, the owners, cannot be sued outside that, unless, then you'll notice, with lawyers, there's always that except, or the exception to the exception. Here's the thing that you got to do, and if you get nothing else out of this tonight, the thing that I would tell you about these, both corporations and limited liability companies, don't treat them like they're not there. What I mean by that is they are separate beings. Here's how people get in trouble. And we saw, there's a whole body of law with corporations. And you'll hear the phrase piercing the corporate veil. And what that basically means is if you don't treat the entity correctly, somebody will sue you for something and they'll be able to pierce that corporate veil. In other words, they'll be able to get rid of that entity and sue you personally. Here's the biggest way this happens. People start paying themselves out of the funds. They just take money out of the entity, the LLC, for example. Or they'll pay their car payment out of the LLC, or their house payment, or they'll take cash to pay something else. Can't do that. Because you've now disrespected the corporate entity. You're just treating it like it's your bank account. Can't do that. So what you want to do is pay yourself a salary, or if you're the owner, you can give yourself, you can repay capital that you put into it. You can take a draw out of it. So you can take money out, but you want to record it as a draw to yourself or as a payment to yourself, and then pay out of your personal account, pay your bills. So don't ever make individual payments out of LLC funds or corporate funds. That's the fastest way. Here's the other way that you can pierce the corporate veil. If you go out and do a business and don't have adequate insurance to cover some liability that is commonplace, they will pierce the corporate veil. That's why that insurance agent is super important. So play by the rules in terms of the way you deal with money. Get insured. If you ever have a question, that's why you want to be able to pick up the phone and call your lawyer or your accountant and say, I'm thinking about doing this. How do I pay this money out? And so that's what you want to do. Separate checkbooks, separate payees. Okay? So a limited liability has members. Now, they can all get together and make decisions, the members. Here's another thing about not piercing the corporate veil. Have meetings. Have meetings of the people that own the business. Some people do it monthly. I recommend to my clients that they do it at least quarterly. Here's a little secret. You don't really have to have a meeting to do stuff. There's a provision in both LLC and corporate law that you can take an action as long as everybody signs off on it. And it's called an action in lieu of a meeting. Your lawyer will know that. So if you can't get everybody together, you can take actions, but everybody has to sign the paper. And do they have to sign the same piece of paper? They do not. And they're called counterparts. Everybody can sign their own, and they can put them all together, and that makes one. So that's the way to do it. Now, what your lawyer will do in the documents when you form these businesses, and I'll talk about that in a sec, is they'll put in the rules that you can meet, and some even just say, we can meet over Zoom, or we can meet on the telephone. Your meetings don't necessarily have to be in person. So I would write in there a generous provision that says that we can meet in any way that we can interact. And that, because who knows what the technology will be, we'll just send brain signals to each other at some point, I think. That's the way we'll do it. Now, what documents need to be created with these? Limited liability company, you go to the Secretary of State, which you'll see I've got a slide here in a minute about the Secretary of State's office. But you're going to file articles of organization. It's just a form that you fill in the blanks. Nothing too crazy. But then if you have a limited liability company of more than one person, and I would even recommend you do it with one person, you're going to have an operating agreement. And that agreement just spells out what happens if You want to bring somebody new in. What happens if somebody wants to leave? Can you have meetings over Zoom? Has all those rules in it. So you don't need to file that with the state of Ohio. That's your document to keep. But you have to do, again, the articles of organization, and then you'll do the agreement between the members, an operating agreement to say how you're going to run your business. So that's how you do an LLC. The form online is not hard. It is a fillable PDF. And you do everything online. Easy. Just have your money ready. Usually $99. That's the secret number right now with the state of Ohio. A corporation takes a little bit more work. And it's why they're not as in vogue. There are some tax reasons to do it, which I will not bore you with tonight. But your favorite accountant will. There are sometimes reasons to do it as a corporation, and that's what you think of shareholders. So you go online and you file your articles of incorporation with the state of Ohio. That's what that's called. So you have articles of organization with an LLC, articles of corporation with a corporation. And then you have shareholder agreements, and you know the names of these. You can have a code of regulations. You can have bylaws. Sometimes people have both. Sometimes people have one. Unfortunately, sometimes people have none. That's bad. And that's what a lawyer will help you prepare. Now, people ask me all the time, I saw when I was at Kroger, I saw a book that says legal forms that you can fill out. Well, I would lose my credibility in the community if I told you those are okay, because I'm not allowed to say that. Here's what I am going to tell you. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they don't. You don't want to be one of the don'ts. I do wills as well, wills and trusts. And people always ask me that about wills and trusts. Well, I can go online and Google an Ohio will, and I tell them, you know what, do it. If you do it the way they tell you, it will work. But if you have one wrinkle in there, one little twist, or you don't do it right when you sign it, you've wasted your money and your time. So, yes, those things are out there. And this doesn't, by the way, it doesn't hurt to do it to educate yourself about what's in it. And it may help you save some money with the lawyer if you bring a document. I've had this happen lots. Somebody will bring me a document and say, well, here's what I think it should look like. And of course I grumble and say, oh, that's not what we're going to do. And then we do it. But I change it a little, right? Because there are times when you have to do that. So are those documents terrible? Is like LegalZoom a bad thing? No, it's not. LegalZoom's run by lawyers. They design forms. The difference is being able to make sure it adjusts to you individually, okay? So those are the different entities. Now there are things called limited liability partnerships. There are things called limited partnerships. And there's even a thing called a limited liability limited partnership. Why would you do those things? Well, my law firm, not my law firm, I work there, but the partners have a limited liability partnership. And that's because under the way you have to practice law is you have to get malpractice insurance. So the general partners, the people that are at the top of the heap, have certain liability. They always have liability for everything they do. They have limited liability for what somebody else does. And if you're a lowlife like me there, you don't have liability for anybody else. And that's a particular limited partnership. The limited liability limited partnership was brand new, so we don't know exactly what we're going to do with that. We think it's cool. It's got a lot of words in it, but we're not exactly sure how we're going to apply it to some of our clients yet. And you can convert between all these things. The only problem with conversion, sometimes it means you might have a tax bill. So don't change anything without talking to an accountant, because he or she may tell you, oh, but you got to pay on your assets. Now the bill is due. So just be careful before you do that. Okay? Any questions about any of that on the entities? All right. My favorite one is limited liability companies, LLCs. Every time I've started one of my own, that's what I've done, because they're easy. They're easy to change and adjust in the agreement, and I just think it saves me time. All right. Filing stuff. So all these entities are state-driven, except for one thing, and I'll tell you about that in a second. So when you file things, you go to the Ohio Secretary of State's office, and that's what their business services website. So when you go there, you'll click on businesses on the main page, because they do other things like elections, and they have all kinds of other things they do. So just check on businesses up there in the top ribbon, and that's the page you'll see right there. That is Frank LaRose there, right, by the way. That's who that is sitting at the table. And I like what he's done with the office. When I started, gosh, almost 40 years ago, we didn't do anything online, obviously. And we had to go in their office, which was in the basement of the Rhodes Tower, and wait in line and sometimes not be treated as well as we thought we should be treated, which, by the way, is pretty high because we have huge egos. But now online, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. And you can do, the thing is, you can also, if you do want to do it at 11 o'clock at night, you can do that. You still meet the deadlines. Before, you had to get there before they closed the doors, and we would literally call them to please keep the door open so we can file something. So that is it, ohiosos.gov. It really is a good site. And if you look at the materials that Sue put out, the Secretary of State's office does a wonderful job at creating materials. And they are also, and this is what, we hate to call people on the phone and ask for help because we're afraid we'll be a million miles away and they won't understand what our problem is and whatever. Secretary of State's office has some of the most helpful people on the phone. I'm never afraid to call them if I have a question. I'm really pleased with the way it has developed over the years. And they still have an office you can go to in downtown. If you want to drop something off or you have a question, you can still go there, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. In fact, it's actually really pleasant to be there and get your questions answered. Okay, so what do you do with the Secretary of State? Well, first of all, you got to come up with a name. This is what I get asked this the most of all, is the name. So my little sports website that I started is called C-Bus Sports. That's pretty good, I think. We'll see if it lasts, right? cbussports.com. So what I had to do is a couple things. And I'm going to tell you this, the way businesses do this now, is they care less about the name availability at the State House. It used to be really hard. If there was anything close to your name, you couldn't use it. Today, they care less about that. They just want to make sure people aren't going to be confused. So you can get away with a lot more today than you used to be able to get. In terms of, it's close to this, but it's enough, different enough. But where people go first, more often than not, GoDaddy. They go online to see if they can get a domain name. Because that's really, and for me, that was sports. I mean, being able to get that name here in Columbus was a big deal to me. So the first place I went, I actually have a service called Bluehost that hosts the websites that I do. And I went there and did their checker, and I jumped on it right away. I actually did that 7 years ago. That's how long it took me to get off my backside and actually do it. But I did. Then, in this business, I already have another, I'm not trying to make this complicated. I have another LLC, it's called Shearwater Media, which I've had for a while. I'm a bird fanatic. I actually take pictures and do all that. And so I name my companies after birds. That is really nerdy. I just want you to know. In the business world, that's super nerdy. I have my media company is named Shearwater Media. Shearwater is an ocean bird. You go on these, it's a pelagic bird if you want to know all that. Okay, so I named Shearwater Media. I went to my accountant and I said, I'm going to do this website. And he gets tired of me calling him, so he goes, let's just do this website under the Shearwater name. Like, we'll make it a division of Shearwater. Because I also do some community work. I do some websites for community stuff and whatever. Anyway. So I said, great. I have to keep those amounts separate, the costs, and I have some employees, and so I have to keep all that separate on the books just to make sure that we do things we're supposed to do. But if you were just starting a business, just out of whole cloth, you'd go and make sure you get the domain name or something close to it. Maybe you put the in front of it, or you add a word at the end of it, or whatever you're going to do. And then I go to the Secretary of State to see if I can start an LLC, for example, with that name. Now, what I had to do, because I'm using a name that's different than the company that I'm doing, is I went and got a trade name registration. So that's what you do. If you're using a name that's different than your corporate or LLC name, for example, you go get a trade, you file the trade name with the state of Ohio. And even then, if somebody else already has it and you're still using it, you can file what's called a fictitious name to tell the world that I'm using this name for this company. Because the Secretary of State, if you do something wrong, they want to be able to find you. So you have to tell them, I'm doing business this way under this entity. So I had to tell them I was doing C-Bus Sports under Shearwater. So that way if somebody has a complaint. Now on websites, you also put it, you know those boring things at the bottom you can click on, terms of service and privacy policy? You put it in there a lot. That the real owner of this website is, in my case, Shearwater Media. And if you want to really yell at us, here's the place to call us or email us or whatever. And we didn't mean to do any harm, but call us. And so those are the ways that we find names. But we also protect them as much as we can. Now, by just putting it out there, by the way, if you just use a name, that's technically protection. You don't have to file that anywhere. But we're going to tell you, you should do a trade name to protect it even more. It's the belt and suspenders approach. There's another website in town called cbusradio.com, cbussportsradio.com. And when I was looking it up, I found this guy. And I thought, you know, I've got a law background, paid a lot of money for the education. I should probably just run him out, because he came after me. I should probably just run him out of business, you know. No, I didn't think that. I actually called him. We had lunch, and now we do business together. That's the way I do things, because it's a lot easier, and I'm not looking over my shoulder all day. And he's a good guy who's basically been doing the same thing that I've been doing, and now we even put a link to his stuff on our page, because it's just better business that way, I think. No reason to fight. I did say in my first lunch, well, you know I had the name a year before you did, but I just threw it out there just so in case he started thinking about it. But yeah, so that's how you protect names. Now on the Secretary of State's website, you can also go, all the forms are there. And they've got a great index that you can find the form that you need. LLCs, corporations, trade name, fictitious name registrations, all that stuff is there. Now one thing that you're going to have to do when you file either an LLC or a corporation is you're going to have a statutory agent. Don't let that throw you, okay? Because you can be the statutory agent for your own company. And that's a person that, when somebody looks you up on the website, Secretary of State's website, it'll say who the statutory agent is and their address. And that's if somebody has a complaint or wants to sue you or whatever the case may be, they will send it to the statutory agent. So you, as part of the document you file, like the Articles of Organization for an LLC, it has a little place in there where you name the agent, the statutory agent. If you change that, you need to file a name change with the Secretary of State. You'll see a lot of companies that they were about 6 people ago that they have on there because they never thought to change it. So you want to keep up with it. It's another thing that shows that you're respecting the entity. So you go and get a form. Now what will happen is some people will, this happened recently, where somebody printed off a form. I think it was a couple of generations ago that they found it on the website somewhere. And then they went to fill it out and then somehow do something, like scan it. That's not the way it works. You go onto the site, you physically fill it in on the site and then hit file. Now you can print out the form to know the information you're going to need and kind of plan. But now that's how you do it. And then before they actually do it, then you give them your credit card and you pay the $99. For $99, if you have a corporation, you get 990 shares that you can use. And you say, well, what difference does it make? Well, what happens is companies grow and they run out of shares, so they have to go buy more from the Secretary of State. When I was doing it for small businesses, when we first started, we were doing mostly corporations. We would only do 10, so we didn't have to worry about that. All right, and again, you can do all those online. There's a whole list of costs too, so you'll know what you have to do for that. You can ask for, I'll give you a little hint, You can ask for expedited treatment. Like, I'm going to file this, but I want to know, like, in a day. And they'll go, okay, but you're going to pay another $100. Don't pay the $100, because they're pretty good about getting it back to you quickly. So if anybody from the Secretary of State's watching, you guys are doing a great job. That's why. Okay. All right? That's the camera up there. Again, I was raised in a TV family. We always know where the cameras are. So you can pay for expedited. If you absolutely have to get it, you can pay for that and they'll get it to you more quickly. But my experience has been really good with, especially lately, has been really, really good. Now, that's all state stuff. The one thing that you need to do with the IRS, that always strikes in the heart of everybody, is if you have employees, and the next slide will have employee stuff on it, but I just want to tell you, the one thing you should do with the IRS is you need to fill out a form to get your employer identification number, or what's called your EIN. And in the biz, you want to seem real sophisticated, you just call it an EIN. And that's a unique number that identifies your business. You can't, now if you're a sole proprietor, you use your Social Security number. But once you have an entity, I'm telling you, even if you don't have any employees, I would get an EIN, just to keep it separate from you. And it's a form that you fill out and send them. And it's online. Now here's what I'm going to tell you. You can go on and look it up and do it. When you Google it, you will get a bunch of businesses at the top of the list that say, we'll do this for you, and they'll make it sound like they're the government, like they'll have a really governmental name, and they'll charge you to do it. Don't do it. Don't pay it, because it's free with the IRS, and it's not any harder to do it directly with the IRS. Don't get sucked in by these businesses, and I've had a couple of clients do that, and it's like $250 that you could have kept for yourself. But they have that really, now you get that stuff in the mail, has a real official seal on it, and you go, oh, I'm in big trouble. Oh, they just want to refi my mortgage, or whatever it is. There's a bunch of these that deal with getting your EI number, okay? And you got to do that for about everything. Every time you create an entity, like for when I do estate work, if we have an estate, we have to go get an EI number for the estate. Anything that pays taxes under its name should have one of those. So I would recommend that highly. The other thing that you need to do, it depends on your business, is you might need to get licensed for something. If you got a food truck, you're going to have to get licensed with Franklin County, right? Because you're providing food out there, and they want to know what you're doing. I was fascinated with hot dog trucks for a while. I thought this would be a great business, mostly because I like hot dogs, which I found out is not a good reason to start a business. If you like to eat the thing that you're making, not a good thing. But if you're going to do that, for example, there are things that you have to do to make it work. Food trucks, you have to have a place, a brick and mortar place that you go to prepare food, to wash out the stuff in your food truck. And so whatever your business is, you need to look and see if it's licensed by the state in some cases, or sometimes the federal government, like if you start a bank, we were just talking about that, people that are starting banks. By the way, there are some forms involved with that. And they're at all levels. If you're going to start a bank, good luck to you, because you're going to file at every single level you can imagine. Most of the things that we think of are going to probably be at your county level, especially if they're related to food, whether it's a restaurant or a truck or whatever. And that's super important that you do that. At the Drexel, for example, because we served popcorn, really good popcorn, by the way, which people say you get tired of stuff. I never got, that was the best popcorn ever. And that was a job hazard. But we had to go, and those of us that served had to go and get not really a license, but we had to get certified by the county to be able to do it. We had to understand how, because we did make some hot dogs too. I brought that in because I like hot dogs. I don't know if I mentioned that. And you have to keep them at a certain temperature and test them so often and all that stuff. So we did all that. So you want to check and see if you have a license that you have to put out there. All right. This is the catch-all, other stuff. And I've got a real estate mogul here that I promise if I say something wrong, you grab me. What's interesting about real estate was that was just part of the deal. When I left the big law firm that I started with here in town, it's now Ice Miller, I left to start my own. I actually went to the office next door, my friend, and I said, we should go start our own law firm. And I thought he would just laugh, and I'd feel better that I said it out loud, and I'd just go back and start working again. He goes, okay. And so we did. We left. And we started our own firm, and there was no option to do it at home. That would have been absurd. Who works at home, ever? So the first thing we had to do was go find an office. My wife was apparently eager for me to leave because she had already found a place by the time I told her we were leaving. And we had to decide at some point, too, all along the way, do you lease it or do you want to buy a building? There was a house on Broad Street. Once we had our firm for a little while, we thought we should probably, instead of paying rent, we should own something. And so there was a house about midway between here and downtown on the street, on Broad Street, and we went and looked at the house. It was abandoned. There was actually a tree that had come through one of the rooms, but it was this old mansion-y type place. And it was being sold for a song, and then we realized why when we went in the house. It's no longer there. They just bought it and tore it down and now use it as an empty lot, pretty much. But we had to decide about that. And so we do. And whatever you do, there are documents that go with it. Most people lease. And so one of the things that I do as a lawyer is I look at leases for clients to make sure that they're not paying, well, I don't take that back. I don't look at the financial part as much as I look at the other things. For example, are you going to have to pay maintenance fees? Are you going to have to, who pays for the utilities? When they repave the parking lot, are you going to have to pay part of that? When's the last time the roof was fixed? How's the HVAC system? Sorry, I don't mean to strike, I don't know where you are on your projects. I don't want to, So you ask all those questions because you need to give your client an idea of what they're in for and what they're going to pay. And as a lease, that's called a triple net lease, by the way. The lease is where you pay the taxes and whatever the landlord pays in taxes and insurance and maintenance, you pay your percentage of that for the common areas. You're going to pay yours, probably. But like taxes, you pay for your percentage of your use. And then they divide up the common areas. But I've had some clients get burned with new roofs, new parking lots, new HVAC systems. And don't assume if you're buying something that's brand new that it's okay either. Find out what their plans are, because they're going to give you an assessment, and then at the end of the year, they're going to marry those up to make sure that they got everything they needed. And you want an idea. If it wasn't brand new, I would always ask for historical amounts that they would do that. I represented a company called Pet Food Supermart for a long time that later became Pet Zaz. And I learned as a lawyer this. They were changing their name from Pet Food Supermart, and they had 3 names. And they called me in the office as one of the people that had been around for a while with them. And they said, which one of these do you like? And I go, well, the one I don't like is Pet Zaz. And of course, that's not what they wanted to hear, because that's exactly what they named the company. And then, in my little firm, they decided at a convention to sell their business to PetSmart. And unfortunately for my little firm, all the legal work went to Phoenix, Arizona. And we had to recalculate what we were doing pretty quick. But it was a great experience. Because if you ever see a PetSmart store in the Midwest, I probably did the lease for it. I hope good enough that they were able to sell it. That's always the test. Is when they sell the business, they come back and, well, why do you have this lease? They don't want this store. So I hope they didn't do that. So I think we did okay. All right. How long is the lease that you want to pay? I would tell you as a new business, Landlords would like to get you as long as possible. And so if you go in and ask for a 1 year, probably not going to happen. A lot of new businesses, although it's changed a little bit with the pandemic and trying to get people in, a lot of small service businesses are doing 3-year leases. The big box stores like a pet food supermarket were doing 20-year leases. And they could get a lower amount. So the longer you go, the lower the amount's going to be, but you're also tied in. So you got to figure that out. The other thing that you're going to be responsible for when you do this is you're going to be responsible for insurance for the stuff inside your building. The landlord is typically responsible for the walls and the roof, the outer surfaces, but you're responsible for your inventory, the stuff inside, computers. And so you want to make sure you have liability coverage. There's that insurance agent again. And your lease is probably going to require you to have renter's insurance on those things and liability insurance for people that come into your building. So if they slip and fall, for example, that you have coverage for that. All right, the fun part, employees. I haven't had my own employees for a while, and I do again. And it is, again, not that much fun to do because there's a lot of work. Now, people will tell you, oh, just hire them as independent contractors. Well, that may work, and it may not. It doesn't matter what you call them, it matters what their responsibilities are. The more control you have over a person working for you, the more likely it is that they're an employee. If you tell them when to be at work, they use your stuff, your tools, or your computers, and you tell them what results you want when, who you're going to work with, all those kind of ideas of control, the IRS are going to say they're employees. Be very careful about this. When I started this website, a lot of reporters are hired as stringers. They just get a flat fee for a story. The more research I did, the more I thought I'll be on the hook for this. Because I'm telling them where to go to report. I'm giving them the computer to report on. And so it occurred to me that I might be in some trouble, so they became employees. Also, the reason that it makes a difference is you're going to deduct out of their paycheck, right? For Social Security, unemployment insurance, all that stuff. And independent contractors, you don't do that. Well, if your independent contractor doesn't make those payments for themselves, especially workers' comp, this is where it comes up all the time. They're going to look back at you and go, well, you know, really, I think I was really an employee. And if you weren't paying in, you're going to have to pay dollar for dollar whatever happened to them. Heart attack costs a lot of money, right? Or if they broke a bone while they're working for you, that costs a lot of money. So you want to make sure, if they're independent contractors, you want to be very sure about that. Otherwise, make them employees. What benefits do you need to pay? There's no requirement to pay benefits. But if you're in a competitive space, you might need to, because otherwise they'll go work at a competitor. That's where you want to, your accountant can usually refer you to a place where you can get benefits. Like our friends at the Bexley Chamber of Commerce. You should become a member of the Bexley Chamber of Commerce, and that way you'll be entitled to benefits. Our executive director, Brian Drury, is here tonight, so you can talk to Brian. That was a segue right there. Yeah. Shameless plug. But there are lots of ways to get benefits, whether it's workers' comp or health insurance, liability insurance for your people, and they can do that. Should you get a payroll service? I got one, because I hate payroll. I really do. I've done it before, and it's just no fun at all. And if you're in a hurry, it's not a good place to make a mistake. And so my accountant has a payroll service as part of what he does. And so I just use them. So what I do is I tell him, here's how, and I do pay per job. I don't have like salaries. So I have to tell them how much my people are owed that week, and I need them to tell me how much do I have to have in my bank account to cover that. And then I go beg whoever for the money to pay that. And so far, 2 months, we've made payroll every time. Next month, who knows? But yeah, I think payroll services are worth it. And now, by the way, you don't even, it used to be that they would make checks and you'd go pick them up and then hand them out. And that was kind of cool to hand out checks. But now it's all direct deposit. So you tell them, you get the voided check, you give that all to them, and that's how you take care of that. So I would recommend that you do it. It's really not that expensive. Especially when you're starting out and you're not big numbers, you can do it. Do you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, so how does interns play into that?
Yeah. So he's asking about interns. Okay, here's the thing with interns. Interns have to get a benefit, right? The days of slave labor over. Don't ever count on it. We have interns at our law firm, but we look to get them credit at their college or law school that they're at for the time they serve with us. Now, we don't necessarily have to pay them, but I don't like not paying them. And I would never recommend having interns that you're not doing something for. But the cool thing is if you're doing college students for an opportunity, so they want to see what you do, and there'll be plenty that will volunteer to do it for free. But I would find a way to give them some value, and the best way is to get them credit at their college, or in our case, law school as well. So I'm wary of, I just worried, I've got a few of these in my lifetime for clients, those bills from the IRS. That's a bad day. So, and I also think it helps you as a business person. Here's the other thing I would say about interns, and this has nothing to do with legal, just practical experience. Don't make them paperclip counters, right? That's not a reason to have an intern. That's an employee. That's a part-time employee. Interns should learn the business, and here's why. If we do our job right, and I am in charge of the interns at our law firm in the summer, they then become a resource. If you're just doing it for selfish reasons, they become a resource for your business down the road. And if you treated them not well, that is not what you want on the street about your business or in the law school or wherever they are. So give them things to do that make a difference in their life and train them a little bit. Do that. Do the right stuff. And then show them that you also count paper clips, and maybe they'll have to do a little because that's part of the business. All right, that was a long answer to a short question. Sorry. But yeah, that's been my experience. People are really grateful if you don't have to do a lot, but plus you just feel better about yourself. I think I've reached a point now where it's more about teaching. I just saw this, I read this thing recently where when you get to a certain age that I have achieved, it's really more about you've put all your kids through school and all that, and now it's about teaching. And so I enjoy that part of it a lot. Okay, technology. That is the innards of something, I think. So that's very technology-ish. Question is, how do you deal with your equipment? And this becomes important because let's go back to the real estate thing for just a second. This will blend into technology. We got a lot of people working at home now. And at the chamber, it's one of the things that we work hard at is to be able to bring those people in as members because there's still a reason to be collegial and have relationships. And I once had a lawyer say, I shouldn't have to do this or that because I'm not a salesman. And I thought, yeah, you are. We all are. Everybody who has a business is a salesperson. Everybody. Because whatever you're doing, you're selling your services, goods, good name, whatever it is. So we all are. When you're working at home, you're doing it through your technology. And we've all been on enough Zoom meetings now that we know when we think somebody's struggling and when somebody gets it. It's like in our office, we don't want it to be stuff just thrown all over nobody wants to hire a lawyer that looks like they're totally disorganized. Even if we are in the closet or whatever, we keep all our, stray stuff. We try to put on a good face, and that's the same with technology. Number one, when you're doing, and this again, not a legal thing, but just starting a business thing, know how to use it. Know how to if you want to blur your background, just do it correctly. And if you don't blur your background and you've got something behind you that is compromising, think about it. Work through the technology. It's funny, but lawyers could never have had meetings with clients over technology before the pandemic. They would have thought we were just phoning it in, literally. But now people expect that's the first thing they want to do is have a Zoom meeting. They don't want to come downtown where our office is and have to park and navigate traffic back and forth. They want to do Zoom. So I have to know how to do it in a way that's meaningful. If I nobody likes to hear this, oh, I don't know how to do technology. Don't use that line as a business person. I remember lawyers when I first started working, and computers had this, oh gosh, this will date. Computers had just come out. There weren't really personal computers yet, there were business computers. I had one of the very first ones. It was called a K-Pro 2, and it was a big steel box. And they said it was a portable computer. If you were Arnold Schwarzenegger, it was a portable computer. And you would lift it up and carry it, and then you'd fold down the top of it, and that was the keyboard, and it had a little green screen about that big. And then you'd print it out on your dot matrix printer that was so loud you had to put a bubble on it so that your next door neighbor wouldn't complain. And we thought it'll never get better than this. I don't have to do my Selectric with the erase key going back or pile on the whiteout or whatever it was. And so we thought it'd never get better. And it's just, it's like daily now something else happens. But you should know how to use it in a way that impresses your clients or your customers, because it matters. Now, do you want to lease or own your equipment? As a legal thing, it depends. On your taxes, you can't write off, like if I go buy, they've got a neat little switcher over here called the A10 Mini. I do some live streaming on this sports website, so we have one of those too. They're very cool. That costs, and I don't know which version you have, but the cheapest one costs $295. My dad, who was in TV, is probably rolling over in his grave because that's a little TV camera switcher for $295. In the TV days, that would cost about $50,000 in old dollars. So it's amazing what we can do now. And I would say try to master that. But should you buy that for $295? You should buy it. If you're going to go buy a computer system for your business that costs $50,000, I would lease it, because that way you can get updates. You can't write it all off at once. Like if you go buy the $295, I can't deduct $295 all at once. I have to amortize that over time. You'll see that with assets you buy. You can deduct it over the years. But do it. When I started this new business, I owned a bunch of stuff. I put it all in there. It's now owned by the LLC, so I can write it off. Right? If I go cover a game in Cincinnati, I get to write that off. So be smart about that. Ask your accountant, what can I deduct? Can I get a company car? How do we do that? Do all that. What platforms should you use? This comes down to the Windows and Apple world. Which should you use? And I tell you, use the one that you're comfortable with. Apple is more expensive, but studies have shown they last longer. And the technology within them lasts longer. I started out with PCs when I first started, and they were fine, and they did great. I switched over to Apple when we started doing some of our own design work, and they were made more for design stuff. And I'm just more comfortable now with Apple. Plus, when somebody calls me now on my iPhone, it rings on my computer and my iPad, which doesn't irritate my family at all. So there's no perfect answer to that. Get what works for you. It used to be when you started out a business, you'd get a visit right away from a copier salesman. They were relentless. Like if you were too mean to be a car salesman, you would be a copier salesman. And they were good. I bought one way, way, way too expensive because it was cool. It did a lot of stuff that I did not need, but it was cool. Maintenance and support options. Here's where you need, again, this is where this tech guy comes in, or gal, it doesn't matter, obviously. But what you want to do is find a company that you can get on the phone that has help for you 24 hours. The worst thing in the world is to have a problem at 6:01 and the person's not there. A lot of times when you buy things, when you buy equipment, you have the option to get support. I would recommend that you do that with your bigger items. I don't know that I'd get the warranty, which again is how salesmen make their money. My son was a phone salesman, so I know that whole game now. But do look for support, because sure enough, you're going to have a request for a proposal that you're going to have to respond to that's due, and you're on your way to FedEx office to get it overnighted, and all of a sudden the printer stops working. So do that. Now, fortunately, most of the stuff you can do online now, but every once in a while. So that's my recommendation for that. All right, I've hit my time. And there you go. So I'm glad to answer any questions. That was really fast about a lot of things that take more time to talk about. I am always happy to answer questions. So that's my cell number right there. And I do pick it up because I'm not that genre now where you have to text somebody to tell them you're going to call them. Just call me. I mean, I'll either pick up the phone or I won't. The other thing is my kids are always mad at me because I actually leave a voicemail message. That apparently is not cool anymore to do that, right? Just the number? Yeah, they don't. Yeah. They just want to see your number pop up. So, yeah. So that's it. But there are things that are more in depth about any one of these things that you might have questions about. And I am not a you should hire me person. I'm a you should think about hiring someone. Maybe you know someone. But here are the things that you might want to think about. I do that all the time. Right? So really, don't be afraid to give me a shout. And my office is down there. It's just, you can't see it, and it's not tall and not well lit. Other than that, it's actually in that area. Yeah, somewhere. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate your time tonight. Is it okay?